Hello, this is Justin Williams. It's rivalry week, and you're listening to the Wolfpacker podcast. I'm joined today by co host Matt Carter. And before we get too far along in this episode, this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there has never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you are guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 five-star reviews. Give Hunter Clausen a call today at 480-513-3992 or email Hunter directly at hclausen@jfqlending.com. That's HCLAUSSEN at jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending, Inc., Equal Access Lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. And while you're at it, we have a limited time promo code for our listeners to use. Please be sure to take advantage of this deal before it's too late. It's a special in honor of Rivalry Week for NC State UNC this Saturday at noon in Kenan Memorial Stadium. But that promo code is PAC20. That's PAC20. And you can get your first year on the wolfpacker.com as a premium subscriber for only $20. That's huge savings. So definitely be sure to take advantage of that. I believe I think we're only going up until kickoff at noon on Saturday. So this is going to be a limited time deal, and you definitely want to be sure to take advantage of it while it's still active. So use that promo code PAC20. You're going to get a ton of great premium news, content, and analysis of everything Wolfpack athletics. So head over to thewolfpacker.com, use promo code PAC20, and enjoy great savings while you get to read all about NC State's great football season so far. And that's going to take you well into men's basketball season as well, which we have coming up. But we're not focused on that right now, Matt. All focus is on UNC Tar Heels right now. Everybody loves this week. It's the biggest week of the year for NC State football fans, as the Wolfpack are going to head to Chapel Hill on Saturday at noon to take on the 14th ranked Tar Heels. It's going to be the third meeting in over 110. It's going to be the 110th meeting, I believe, in this rivalry. Only the third time in history that both of these teams will be ranked in the AP Top 25 poll. UNC ranked number 14. They were ranked number 5 before falling to Florida State last week, 31-28 in Tallahassee. And NC State slid into the rankings at number 23 after its 31-20 victory over Duke in Carter Finley Stadium. The Pack advanced to 4-1. And don't look now, but NC State is now ranked alone at number 3 in the ACC standings. Only 2 teams ahead of them. They're both undefeated. They're both in the top 3 in the country, Clemson and Notre Dame. So NC State in prime position there in the ACC standings. And with a win Saturday, it would put the Wolfpack in great position to finish out the season as they head into the bye week after this week. Of course, NC State's going into this game as an underdog. I think the last time I checked, they're 17-point underdogs. Of course, that's due to the fact that redshirt sophomore starting quarterback Devin Leary was hurt with a broken fibula in the game against the Blue Devils. He will be out for at least 4 to 8 weeks. Probably not going to see him back again, at least in the regular season this year. So now the signal caller will be redshirt junior Bailey Hockman, which we've already seen this season. He's 1-1 on the season. He did win the season opener against Wake Forest, 45-42, but struggled in the Pack's first road game up in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech, NC State's only loss of this season. So, Matt, I've touched on a bunch of different things, but I think we should start with the Duke game because we need to talk a little bit about that performance. It wasn't the prettiest win per se. An ugly start for the Wolfpack, frankly. I mean, the first quarter was not great. They were lucky to be down only 10-0 after 15 minutes, and Duke got off to an early lead with that initial punt block there on NC State. But NC State was able to end the first half with momentum with that punt block of their own. Levi Jones blocked the punt in the Duke red zone, and then Max Fisher scooped and scored it to shrink the lead to 3 points with 48 seconds to go in the first half. And then NC State shuts out the Blue Devils in the second half, doesn't commit any penalties, and wins the game 31-20. So, Matt, before we dive into the UNC game, I just want to hear your thoughts and takeaways on the Duke victory.
It was it's a game that NC State normally would lose, to be blunt with you. You don't turn the football over 3 times and give up a block punt return for a touchdown. Plus lose your starting quarterback, lose the captain of the secondary, lose your other starting safety. He was for targeting. Tanner Ingle got hurt. You're playing with a walk-on and a true freshman at safety. Your second string quarterback for the entire fourth quarter in what was a 1-point game at that point. You had the mistakes. You had the 100-plus yards and penalties at halftime. NC State does not win that game 9 times out of 10, and I would venture to say maybe 98 times out of 100. So that says one or two things. One, it might be an indictment on Duke. Find out about that. 2, it might be a credit to NC State that perhaps, we didn't have this at all last year when we talked about NC State. Margin of error. They might actually have a margin for error with this football team. Or it could be both. Could be both an indictment on Duke and the fact that this NC State team had a margin for error against this particular Duke team. But to me, that's what stood out. Is that having covered NC State, this is, I think, my 16th football season, maybe, that NC State does not win that game very often at all. So that's what you have to take away, is that how pleasing that was. Kind of the second victory where NC State done something like that. They haven't typically go on the road in the ACC, drive down the length of the field and win the game in the last second like they did against Pittsburgh. So this is a resilient football team that we've seen so far. And I'm willing to forgive the Virginia Tech loss. So I really think that at this point you're about as pleased as you can be to get double-digit wins over Virginia and Duke. Shows you that this is a team that, at a minimum, belongs in the top of that second to third tier of the ACC, depending on how you want to play. If you want Clemson by themselves, and not to say that there isn't any other team in the second tier, in that top tier, then I would say you were saying NC State top team in the third tier. If you want to throw a Notre Dame in there with Clemson, which I think is silly, you could say top, toward the second tier. But this is another barometer game for NC State. I understand why they're heavy underdogs. I would project them to be heavy underdogs. They have a lot going against them this game, but we saw against Duke, they shot themselves in the foot. How many times? 20 times, and they came out and still won the game. So they used to back against the wall.
Well, as you alluded to, 8 penalties for over 100 yards lost in that first half. Completely shot yourself in the foot there if you're NC State. Again, Duke was not able to take advantage of NC State's early mistakes. They really should have had at least a double-digit lead. A good team would have been up 3 or 4 touchdowns on NC State heading into the locker room. But another interesting stat from Saturday's game to take away is that this was Dave Doran's first double-digit comeback victory in 8 years at NC State against an ACC opponent, which I found shocking. But if you go back and you look at the schedules, it's true. And credit to NC State's players and coaches for, staying in the game, making the proper adjustments at halftime to come back and get the victory. But a big win for, not just these players to gain confidence and know that they're going to be in every game, no matter what the situation is, but also a good confidence builder for this coaching staff to, keep up the adjustments, keep doing what they're doing. And now we're going to see how it looks against the highest ranked team that they've played so far. This is going to be the 3rd time they've played a ranked opponent on the road this season. Virginia Tech was ranked, I think, 21, maybe I think they were ranked a little bit lower when they went up to Blacksburg. And then Pittsburgh, of course, was ranked 24 when NC State beat them in Heinz Field. So NC State has had their, experience this season playing a ranked opponent on the road. This is going to be a little bit different. It's Not going to be a true road atmosphere with limited fan capacity. And of course, it's a short trip up to Chapel Hill. So, I mean, frankly, the game in Kenan Memorial Stadium never feels like a true road game. But let's talk about this upcoming game because, you know, that Duke game was really won with solid defense, a tremendous performance from Peyton Wilson, redshirt sophomore linebacker. 19 tackles. I believe it's the first time since Earl Wolf did it in 2012 that an NC State defender had 19 tackles in a game. And then he also comes up with 2 interceptions, the first time a linebacker gets 2 picks in a game since Gerard Fernandez in 2014 against Jameis Winston and the #1 Florida State Seminoles that year. So great individual performance for Wilson, a great defensive performance for NC State, probably their best of the season. They were able to get 3 turnovers, get that takeaway bone out 3 times. You know, you would have liked to have won the turnover margin against a team like Duke, who entering the competition led the FBS in total turnovers. They had 19 going into that game. I imagine that they still lead the FBS with the most turnovers in the country. But with that said, you know, that's going to be one of the keys to this game against UNC. So let's talk about it. I think the first thing that we should talk about is Bailey Hockman. It's now going to be his 3rd start of the season. We have somewhat of an understanding of what he has shown this season. And really the question is, which Bailey Hockman is going to show up in Chapel Hill on Saturday? Is it going to be the Bailey Hockman that we saw in game 1 against Wake Forest, who was a solid game manager, didn't turn the ball over? He had 1 interception late in the second half, but it didn't kill him. He completed
a pick 6.
Well, but it was a pick 6. It's never good to turn the ball over. Look, but compared to the Virginia Tech game, all in all, you'll take it because he goes out there, he completes his first 13 passes. I think he had at least one passing touchdown, and NC State was able to get it done on the ground. They had 260 yards rushing that game, still their season best this year. But against Virginia Tech, it started at the offensive line. Hockman was under pressure all night, but he had a lackluster performance against Virginia Tech and was pulled after his second interception in the 3rd quarter. Devin Leary goes in. He scores a touchdown on the first drive, and then the rest is history. Leary has played well ever since, but now that's not an option. So, Matt, what does Bailey Hockman have to do on Saturday to give this NC State team a chance at going to 5-1?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail. Game manager. You've got to be a good game manager. I think the key for Bailey Hockman is understanding who he is and being playing within yourself. And you and I have talked off air. I think some of the issues with Bailey Hockman, and maybe this is on the offensive coaches as well, Tim Beck, offensive coordinator, and asking him to do something that perhaps is not in his wheelhouse. Well, it could be an issue of Bailey Hockman, and I've kind of compared it to being the 20% three-point shooter shooting a three-point shot 5 seconds into the shot clock in a crucial late-of-game situation in basketball. There's some throws that he gets in trouble with that end up being interceptions, including the pick 6 against Wake Forest, the one that should have been a pick 6 against Virginia Tech. If they give Hockman a lot of credit for hustling and getting back and preventing, at least momentarily, a touchdown. But he had a similar one against Boston College, and what was his last hurrah as a starter in 2019. He threw a pick 6. That's almost 3 pick 6s. He almost had an interception in the end zone against Duke. He got away with another one. You're catching a theme. It's right now the key for Bailey Hockman is just to quit throwing interceptions. If he takes care of the football, I think he can be a fine college football quarterback. It's not like he's handicapping the offense with his arm. He doesn't have a killer arm. He's not Devin Leary throwing the football out there, but he's got fine enough arm strength, and he's not as stiff in the backfield. He can move a little bit. He's the coach's son, and if he plays within himself and just simply manages the game, which is what he was doing for most of Wake Forest, He got in trouble a couple of times early in the game. He was bailed out. Wake didn't take advantage of him making some throws he should not have made. Finally, he got caught. He made a throw he shouldn't have made, and it was an easy pick six. If he avoids those, and gets away with, you're never going to be perfect on your decision making, right? No quarterback ever is perfect. Even the great Sam Howell over at UNC threw a terrible pick six against Florida State. So no quarterback is perfect. But if you can avoid the mistakes when you make, the catastrophic mistakes, I guess is the best way to say it. That's what Bailey's really got to stick with. Stick with the throws he can make, which are particularly, I think, over the middle. He's pretty good over the middle. He's good with the short intermediate passes. And even downfield. He hasn't gotten a lot of trouble throwing passes downfield. It's mainly been those sideline passes, that's 7 to 10 yard downfield, but also across the field to the sideline. It's clear that's not his forte, and that's what he's got to stay away from. And then also handling the pressure better. I thought against Virginia Tech and then against Duke, he stared down the pressure too much. I remember Terry Harvey, former NC State quarterback, once telling me the good quarterbacks look through the pressure. The bad quarterbacks look at the pressure. I remember Chuck Amato once told me that Norm Chow taught him a drill where you have the quarterback in the backfield and you put 4 medicine balls. Don't tell him which medicine ball is going to come at him. And have him snap the ball to the quarterback and then roll a medicine ball out to the quarterback. What did the quarterback do? If the quarterback looking for the medicine ball, you got a problem. Because he's clearly going to be looking at the pressure. So that's what Bailey Hockman got to get away from. Don't worry about the pressure. Feel it, work the pocket, and avoid the throws that can be catastrophic mistakes, and stick with what's in your wheelhouse. If he does that, I still think NC State can have a solid offense, and probably not the upside of Devin Leary, but it can still be a solid offense with the running backs, with the receivers, with the tight ends. It can still be a solid offense, and then hope that your defense continues to progress to the point where you don't need to be a prolific offense every week.
Well, first and foremost, the offensive line is going to have to give him a chance to have success in this game. And they have shown over the past 3 games that they can do that. In the Virginia game, the offensive line doesn't give up a single sack to Devin Leary. They did give up 3 sacks to Duke on Saturday, but that was Duke's strength as a defense, is those pass rushers, particularly those defensive ends.
And I saw a stat where Pro Football Focus said they may have had the top 2 pass rushers, defensive ends in the ACC, may both be on Duke.
Yeah, Rumph and Dimukeje, both couple seniors who are all ACC candidate, pass rusher types, and limiting them to 3 sacks is actually, compared to what they've done against other teams in the ACC this season, not bad. It's a passing grade for that offensive line. And considering the injuries, you lose a Tyrone Riley in the middle of the game. You go into that game without Justin Witt. So it was nice to see Ike Ekwonu move over to left tackle. He had his best game of the season. So we'll see if he can continue that success. It looks like he may stick around at that left tackle position, as it clearly looks that he's most comfortable there. He had been playing left guard in the first 4 games of the season. But when Bailey Hockman plays his best, he steps up in the pocket and he's able to use his feet just as much as he's able to use his arm. That's what he did against Wake Forest. I think he finished the game with something like 30, 35 rushing yards, but he picked up multiple first downs on the ground, which made the Wake Forest defense, stay true. He was able to complete his first 13 passes. He was effective in the play action game, and that made Wake Forest, stay true in the secondary, not stack the box, allowed Hockman and those running backs to get going on the ground, which I think is the formula to success on Saturday. Which brings me to, I think, my most important key to this game is NC State has to win the battle of time of possession. You got to keep the ball out of sophomore quarterback Sam Howell's hands. He's one of the best college quarterbacks in the game. NC State fans know this. UNC fans know this. Both the coaches on those sidelines know this. So I think you want to be aiming for, if you're an NC State fan, be aiming for about 35 minutes time of possession. I mean, I think that's a bare minimum of what it's going to take in terms of, how NC State can control the pace of this game, keep the ball out of that explosive UNC offense's hands, and score when you have the possession. As long as you're not turning the ball over. Doran mentioned it earlier on Monday. As long as your offensive possessions are ending with kicks, whether they be PATs, field goals, or punts, that's success as opposed to an interception or a fumble. So can they win the time of possession? It's going to have to be a big game from those running backs. Ricky Person had a great game against Duke. He finishes with over 100 all-purpose yards for the second time this season. We know Bam Knight is completely capable of breaking off for big runs. He's had 3 games with over 100 all-purpose yards this year. He ran for 101 rushing yards against Virginia, and he's still leading the NC State running backs in terms of yards per carry this season. So they've got 2 great backs, and not to forget sophomore Jordan Houston, who's an elusive running back that NC State can throw into the equation when they want a little speedster in there. He's a great little complement to Person and Knight. But anything else we should be watching for on offense, Matt, before we talk about UNC's personnel? Because a lot of it is on their offense.
You talking about NC State's offense? What to watch for? Right.
Other than the run game and Hockman, I mean, yeah. I personally, maybe I'll let you finish this off, but maybe a big Kerry Angeline game.
Could be. I mean, you would think he'd be an ideal target for Bailey Hockman. He had a good game against Wake Forest when Hockman was a quarterback. Look, the team that's going to run the ball more effectively in this game is probably going to be the team that, I'll put it this way, if UNC runs the ball more effectively than NC State, then UNC probably wins, and we're talking about whether or not they covered. If NC State runs the ball more effectively than UNC, we're talking about a game that's probably far more competitive than people thought, and could be very exciting, especially from an NC State perspective, knowing that, this is going to be a really competitive game. So I really think, to your point, a lot's going to be, there's been the strategy that Dave Doran normally uses against UNC. The first year, obviously, NC State lost to everybody in the ACC, but since 2014, Doran's had pretty good success against UNC, really outside of 3 quarters. In 2015 in Carter Finley Stadium, UNC blitzed NC State in the first quarter, obliterated them, and the game was probably over. But to NC State's credit, they kept fighting, and they were probably going on a possession away from making it interesting. It could have been kind of a repeat of Florida State UNC last game, right, where Florida State obliterated UNC early, and UNC came all the way back and made it even more interesting, and NC State was able to make it. And then last year, the last 2 quarters, I mean, and people forget, I think NC State led at halftime against UNC last year. It fell apart really in the 3rd quarter. You could just limit it to the 3rd quarter. It fell apart. And that strategy typically been the same. We're going to be more physical than you. We're going to run the football against UNC. I believe it was 2016. They maybe threw the ball 10 times all game, and they ran the ball like 50 times. That's the MO. That's the way they like to approach it. It made sense with Larry Fedora. Wasn't known for having great defenses and taking a kind of a Big 12 style approach, and keeping their offense off the field made a lot of sense. I think you should use a similar approach with your running game this Saturday against UNC. But you can't just. You're going to have to still throw the football. But we're talking about it. You're talking about it. I'm talking about it. I'm sure NC State's talking about it. You know who else is talking about it?
Yeah, they know it's coming. They know it's coming.
So you can expect them to load the box and dare Bailey Hockman to beat them. So I wouldn't be completely stunned if early in the game, NC State tried to surprise UNC with some passes to try to keep them honest. Open it up a little bit, and then get to the game plan of controlling it on the ground.
And maybe even a little trick play action. Can we potentially forecast a Thayer Thomas passing touchdown?
He's not throwing the ball too well in his 2 passes this year.
Well, they've been broken up. Yeah. He's gotten pressure.
He almost got intercepted on the one against Duke, and so I like the one I said in our premium chat today. If you're not a member of the site, always have a premium shot on Wednesday. I called for the old throwback to the quarterback pass. I guess that would still be Thayer Thomas throwing the football, but throw back to the quarterback. Philip Rivers caught the touchdown against UNC in 2000 on the play. That might catch you by surprise.
Well, we will see. I mean, looking back on the series history, not to beat it to death, but you look at the series history as long as Doran's been here over the 8 seasons he's been here. 2014, his first win against UNC in Kenan Stadium, the Jacoby Brissett game where he has 4 touchdowns. He threw for less than 100 yards, but he had, I think, over 150 yards rushing in that game with the 4 touchdowns. And then you look at Nyheim Hines' career best, his 180-yard game in Carter Finley Stadium, I believe, in 2017. If I'm not mistaken. You think of Reggie Gillespie's 4 touchdown performance in 2005. Excuse me. I was there. I was still a student. So forgive me if I don't remember every aspect of that game sitting in the NC State section there.
And real quick, in 2016, Matthew Days, I think, ran for about $130 in that game.
So we've now covered all 4 of NC State's wins over Carolina while Dave Doran's been here. And guess what? There's been a stellar rushing performance by at least one individual in each of those games. So who will it be? We will find out, but that's the key to success on Saturday.
And if I may say real quick, UNC's run defense is very suspect. I mean,
it's gettable.
Now, it got off to a great start. Everybody was talking about how good they were statistically, and then you realize Syracuse couldn't stop Justin Williams and Matt Carter in the backfield from running for 100 yards. And then Boston College only tried to run the ball 10 times, I think, and they threw it about 50 or 60 times in that game. The last 2 games, they've been shredded, relatively speaking. Virginia Tech runs the football on everybody, but they still shredded.
Well, I was about to say, to be fair, Khalil Herbert has shredded everyone. Yeah. So you got to take that with a grain of salt, but I'm with you there. Their run defense is suspect, and they only have one Chaz Surratt on their team, who is their, one to watch on that UNC defense. If you're going to,
they also gave up 241 yards rushing to Florida State, and that is not a good Florida State offensive line. And interestingly, I was surprised. PFF, Pro Football Focus, had not given kind grade to Chaz Surratt or the other good linebacker, Jeremiah Jamel, I think is how you pronounce his name. So that's interesting. And they gotten poor tackling grades this year as well. So there is a potential opening to run the football against UNC.
Well, we'll see. Let's hope. I mean, we know what the equation is. As you mentioned, everybody knows what the equation is. So they know the fastball's coming. Let's just see if it can get past Carolina. But I do want to talk about this Carolina offense because that's, the other thing that everyone's talking about. And I think it discounts the NC State defense because the defense has played so well the past 3 weeks. I mean, granted, Kenny Pickett had his 400+ yard passing performance against NC State and Pittsburgh, but the defense did what it had to do to get the game done, to win the game. They give up over 40 points in each of the first 2 games, and ever since they haven't let up more than 29. So that has been an improvement, particularly against Duke. In the past 2 games, ever since they've taken out the takeaway bone, they've gotten 7 takeaways total, 6 of them interceptions. And in the first 3 games, they didn't get a single interception. In 2019, they only had 4 interceptions. So something is working about that takeaway bone. If that takeaway bone can come out a few times on Sam Howell interceptions on Saturday, that is good news for the Wolfpack. Speaking of Sam Howell, we don't have to go into that too much because everybody knows he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. But I do want to talk about some of the playmakers that surround him. They've got 2 great running backs who are probably future NFL running backs that are going to be playing on Sundays. You've got senior running back Michael Carter, and then you've got junior running back Javonte Williams. They've both run for over 400 yards this year. They're both in the top 5, according to PFF, in terms of overall offense grading in terms of in running backs. In comparison, Bam Knight is 6. Travis Etienne of Clemson is 7. So that gives you some perspective as to how well those North Carolina running backs have been playing. Matt, what have you observed from their running game so far whenever you've been able to watch UNC through 5 weeks now?
Yeah, and I watched a good bit of the Florida State game. I watched a good bit of their opener against Syracuse. I did not see a heck of a whole lot of the other two games because of the overlap with NC State and, doing my job.
Right.
But I actually thought in the Syracuse game maybe they were trying too hard to. Sam Howell's a great quarterback. We know that. I think he's a future pro. He's the face of the program. And I thought that maybe there was too much of an effort to build on, quote unquote, the face of the program and to maintain that status, and that they threw the ball too much against Syracuse at the expense of really, that game was up for grab going into the fourth quarter when it should have been a blowout going into the fourth quarter. And that's because I don't think if Carolina just ran the football from start to finish, it wouldn't have been an issue. This is going to be a huge challenge for NC State. Let's face it, Duke ran the ball well against Syracuse, but they're not a great running football team. Virginia lost their running quarterback and had to throw the football exclusively in the second half. Pittsburgh is far from a good running football team. So, the NC State defense the last 3 weeks hasn't had to face anything within the stratosphere of what they're about to face Saturday with these two running backs. And I'm a big fan of Javonte Williams. I think he's a future, not only a pro, but a potential impact pro. So that would be my main concern. And they're explosive too. A lot of times people think explosive plays, they're thinking, big passes downfield. UNC gets good chunk yardage in the running game. That's my big concern for NC State. I don't know what the solution is. Other than, you can try to sell out against the run, but then you're opening yourself up to trying to cover guys like De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome and Bo Corrales, who had a huge game against Florida State. That's what makes UNC tough. They are legitimately top 2 in the conference, if not, I think they got the number 1 running back tandem, and they're probably top 2 in quarterback and receivers. If anything, maybe the offensive line hasn't held up as well as it should have, particularly in pass protection. But I expect UNC to come out trying to run the football. And bottom line is, UNC, if you look at their total yardage this year, they're really good. I mean, they've been getting about 500 yards per game. I think they're averaging over 500 yards total offense per game. They're going to get there, and they're going to get their points. That's why it goes back to what we talked about earlier, keeping them off the field with the time of possession advantage, limiting their possession, shortening the game, making each drive count a little bit more. Those are the type of things that I think would be in NC State's favor to do. I guess it's the best way. It would behoove them to do those things, and because UNC is going to get there. Every NC State fan should accept that right now. UNC is going to get points. They're going to get big plays because they're going to do it against every single defense they probably play this year, other than maybe Notre Dame, where it might be more difficult. But just because of the talent they have, and I hope Mack Brown has sent Larry Fedora a nice thank you card for leaving him with a boatload of talent, other than Sam Howell, who Mack Brown did get after he became the head coach. But, little secret, a lot of us thought Sam Howell was going to UNC regardless, and that if Fedora was the coach, he was still going to UNC. Ever since Walt Bell left Florida State, that opened the door for him to pick UNC. So he was left a nice hand on offense, and to his credit, he's taken full advantage of it.
Well, just to give you the insight on the stats a little bit, Michael Carter has been the rushing leader for North Carolina with 478 yards this season. He's averaging 8.4 yards per carry. That's a lot. Javonte Williams.
Think about it. Every time he touches the ball on first down on average, that means it'd be 2nd and 1.
That can't happen. But I'm getting to a point here, Matt. So just hang with me here. Javonte Williams in a similar camp, 6.4 yards per carry. He also has 402 yards this season. But if you look back at the last 2 games for NC State, I know you're discounting the fact that Brennan Armstrong went out early in that game against Virginia. That helped NC State stop the run a little bit. I'll give you that. Duke, that offensive line situation, not necessarily the best one we're going to see in the ACC. I'll give you that. But you look at Virginia's running back, Wayne Talapapa. He's still a good, solid ACC running back. He's no Michael Carter. He's no Javonte Williams. But NC State stops him to just 2.9 yards per carry, holds him to 35 yards in that game. You look at the Duke game, Deion Jackson. He's been one of the ACC's top rushers this season. He went off against Syracuse for over 160 yards. The Wolfpack holds him to 34 yards on 20 carries for just 1.7 yards per carry. So this NC State run defense has shown over the past 2 weeks that it can get it done. The defensive line has been stepping up. It's healthy right now. You should get, knock on wood, potentially Josh Harris back for a potential goal line stand. There's been 3 straight goal line stands in the past 3 wins. Aleem McNeil's playing as good as any defensive tackle in the country right now. He hasn't had a PFF grade below 70 in any of these 5 games this year. You get Daniel Joseph back from an absence a couple weeks ago. And then this linebacker core is healthy as well. Peyton Wilson's flying over the field. Isaiah Moore, a team captain, he can get it done. And then Drake Thomas is, as physical of an outside linebacker as you're going to get in the ACC. So, look, Carolina's got a strong run game, but NC State's run defense has stepped up over the past 3 weeks. So it should be an interesting, intriguing matchup there. And we should touch on the North Carolina receivers as well. Of course, they have that future pro quarterback in Sam Howell, but they've got a lot of great targets as well. You've got De'Ami Brown, 296 yards this season. He's got 3 touchdowns himself. Bo Corrales, Javonte Williams is the main running back target in the receiving game. You also got Daz Newsome, who's electric himself. So Carolina's got some impressive top-end ACC talent in the receiving core. Matt, do any of those guys jump out to you in particular? And if you're NC State secondary, their young secondary, who has just grown before our eyes over the past 3 games here, what type of strategy would you take to limit this UNC pass offense on Saturday?
Yeah, I think the big thing is keep everything in front of you. I think the everything is about keeping those guys in front of you. Sam Howell loves to go deep. Daz Newsome's averaging less than 10 yards a catch this year. You don't want him to have that breakout against you. So I think that the main goal is to keep everything in front of you. NC State's done an excellent job at that this year. Excellent. They haven't really played the quarterback like Sam Howell. They're going to press him deep. Virginia Tech was not a throw it deep team. Wake Forest did try. They threw some shots up there with Donovan Green. And so that was a nice first test for NC State that they passed there. But, Virginia Tech didn't try. Duke was not a throw the ball downfield team. We talked about how Pittsburgh and Virginia really weren't. I think it was Virginia, if I recall, where every receiver was averaging less than 10 yards per catch. Pittsburgh was kind of a one-trick pony with their big play receivers, with Jordan Addison and then not much else. So I think the whole key, keep things in front of you. This may be a game where field goals aren't a bad thing. Forcing UNC to get a special team situation in general is not a bad idea because they've been really struggling with special teams. But bending but not breaking might not be bad in this particular game. So that's, to me, that's something to watch as well. Just kind of keep everything in front of you. And you also got to hope this isn't the game where another playmaker emerges, because it's I thought UNC would have more than the 3 receivers, but they've really been relying heavily on those 3 guys. So that, to me, has been a little bit interesting too. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this podcast up before we get to our final takeaways, the keys to the game. A reminder to use that promo code PAC20 at the wolfpacker.com. That's promo code PAC20. You can get your first year as a premium subscriber to the wolfpacker.com and unlock all of that premium content, news, and analysis of everything NC State athletics for just $20 for your first year. That's big time savings. It's limited time only. I believe that's going to go inactive starting at kickoff at noon. So be sure to take advantage of that deal while you still can. That's promo code PAC20. Go to thewolfpacker.com right now and use that promo code. And before we wrap this up, Matt, my 3 takeaways, and just nod your head if you agree with me. And I think if NC State does these 3 things, they're going to have a chance to win in Kenan Stadium, and Dave Doeren can have a chance to go 4-0 in Kenan Memorial Stadium in his first 8 years at NC State. Win the turnover battle. Bailey Hockman, stay true to yourself. Be a strong game manager. And lastly, what was I? Am I forgetting anything, Matt?
Strong manager, game manager, keep the big plays in front of you, or win the running game, win time of possession.
I completely blanked. But no, time of possession. Thank you, Matt. I completely blanked, but I think that's my most important one. Got to win that time of possession. 35 minutes at least. NC State's got to control the ball. So you do those 3 things, you might have an upset on your hands Saturday, and then they can get to the bye week, get healthy, and see what happens on the other half of the schedule. So before you guys sign off, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're now on Spotify, so you can download us on there. We're, of course, on Apple Podcast app as well as Google Play. This is going to be on YouTube, so please be sure to subscribe to the Wolfpacker YouTube channel. And lastly, follow us on Twitter at the Wolfpacker. You can follow me personally at Justin H. Will. You can like us on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on thewolfpacker.com. And for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.